Everyone. Hello, everyone. All two or three of us. Thank you for us today again on another episode of the Speak Real Instagram live discussion. Here, my name is Lolita. I'm here with my friend and colleague Adam, and we're from an organization called. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, YouthSpeak has been around for about 17 years. And what we do is we go into schools and institutions all around the GTA, and we have youth share their stories of lived experience, surrounding things like mental health and wellness, LGBTQ issues, bullying prevention, online overdrive. So now we're actually rolling out all our programming onto online. So that's amazing. And actually, before I even get started, before I even go any further, I'd like to give a big, huge thank you to our sponsors, the TD Bank Group, who has been making all of this online programming possible. So again, thank you, TD Bank Group, for just making all of this possible and allowing us to even push through, even through COVID times. So today, we're going to be having just an open discussion about mental health and what that means, or in commemoration of the National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. We're just going to be having an open discussion about mental health and what it means to be a POC and how that can affect your mental health. So if you guys have any questions throughout the entire live, go ahead and shoot them off into the comments. We'd like this to just be an open conversation, as well as we'd like it to be a safe space. So if at any point you feel maybe triggered or upset by any of the subject matter that we're talking about, definitely reach out to the Kids Helpline. There's also lots of really great resources on our website, which is www.youthspeak.ca. And yeah, just take a minute to collect yourself, speak with a friend, use some of the resources that we've mentioned, Kids Help Phone or on our website, because we'd like to, again, have an open conversation, but we'd also like to have a safe space. So as well as me and Adam are going to be sharing a bit about our stories and how being a POC and what mental health, how that has affected us throughout our journey. So without further ado, I guess we can get right into the conversation. I guess go ahead, Adam. You can tell us a little bit about how what it means for you to be a POC and how it affected your mental health.
Okay, thank you, Lolita. So yeah, also for the Kids Help Phone, it's just like in the comments if any of you are looking for that phone number. Okay, so I just want to get right into it. So how being a person of color, how being a Black person has kind of affected my mental health and like my mental health journey. This is interesting because I usually don't really like talk about this side of my story when I give my story at schools. And I kind of like, I'm excited to talk about this because I noticed that you started talking about this side of your story, Lolita. So I might even start integrating this into mine. So my story is a lot about me in middle school, me in high school, and also me a little bit in university, going through like struggling with like depression, struggling with anxiety. I had in high school, when going from middle school to high school, I moved to a new school, which is art school, and that's when I started dealing with a lot of like depression, anxiety, those sorts of feelings, and that's when I started feeling like my mental health kind of like going downwards. And like one thing I don't really talk about is a lot of that, some of that kind of had to do with is me feeling like a little bit othered in that space because the school I went to, I came from a school with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different types of people. And then the school I went to was a very like white school, very white space, and there were a lot of things that kind of like pushed on me a little bit, and a lot of like subtle like microaggressions that kind of like affected me in ways that I didn't realize they were affecting me at the time. But like looking back now, I realized that it was affecting me. I remember like being at that school and like one of the things they were always talking about was like, oh, the school is so diverse, this, that, and the other. But when I looked around, it was like it was diverse in the way that like they were very accepting to LGBTQ people. But when I looked around, it was like all white bodies, not a lot of Black and brown people. I don't think there was one person who even wore a hijab at the school. So it's like their idea of diversity was kind of like a bunch of white people with different hair colors, which wasn't my idea of diversity. Um, and a lot of ways that were kind of like invalidating of like my blackness was the way that they looked at art, because this was an art school, so I was thinking like, oh, all sorts of art. So the first thing that kind of like made me feel like they weren't that it was more of white space was because um, a lot of the art forms that were kind of like pioneered by black people, they didn't really like, accept and kind of even like looked down upon. Like for example, when I was in the dance program, and you couldn't really like audition with like hip hop or anything like that. So which was okay because they were mostly focused on modern and ballet. But the thing is, the reason they gave that you couldn't audition with that sort of dance style was because they said it was too two-dimensional and like too simplistic, which I definitely don't agree with. But at the time, I kind of like felt that. I kind of was like, oh, I kind of like absorbed that. Other kind of like examples of this was one of my friends. She was in the visual arts program. She kind of like she was making she they had to do sketchbook. She really liked graffiti art. She filled her whole sketchbook with graffiti art, and she was also a person of color. Um, and she handed it in, and it was beautiful graffiti art, like very very beautiful. And teacher gave her a zero for her whole sketchbook, and I was like, I don't like you. It's interesting that like what they kind of saw as art and what they kind of didn't see as art. So that was kind of like one way. Another way was for example, was a lot of kind of like microaggressions. Like for example, if you're in like if you're like the only person of color in a space, and like say one person makes like a off-color joke, a joke that is not very appropriate, and a lot of other people don't really realize aren't black, or like don't realize that this joke isn't very appropriate, and nobody speaks up. It's hard to speak up about that, and I kind of found myself in a lot of those situations. um, and I didn't want to speak up as the only black person in the room because it kind of felt like I was outnumbered, and I wouldn't want to be the person to kind of like ruin everybody's like vibe, right? And I feel like a lot of that kind of attributed to like a lot of like mental health stress. Um, and then after I left that school, I did also experience racism in a different way. Because when I went to my other school, I kind of like experienced more overt racism from even people I knew for a long time, like people like a lot of white people casually using the N word in my presence, and like not understanding why that wasn't a good thing to do, because they thought like, oh, I'm not calling you it, so I don't see why it's like a problem. And it was just a lot of different things that kind of like didn't it wasn't good for me, pretty much. So yeah, that was kind of like my experience with like kind of like racism, along with like my mental health issues.
Yeah, it's funny because throughout every story that you shared, they're all very subtle things, and I think that
Mhm.
is the main thing with mental health and being a POC. Sometimes some things are so subtle that you kind of second guess, and even that
Mhm.
your mental, it's like,
Yeah.
what am I being overly, am I trying to play some type of race card? Is it just me? Is it my own perspective, or was that really something that was maybe a microaggression, right? So
Hmm.
I totally agree with that, or I resonate that a lot of the times it was just these little things that kind of had you question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that can be hard if you're in a situation where like you're dealing with mental health professionals that might not understand like things like racism, things like microaggressions and stuff. That's why a lot of times I think it's good for like people who are like black, brown, people of color to have mental health professionals who are also people of color, because they can better like connect to that sort of experience. So that you don't have a mental health professional when you start talking about racism with a mental health professional, they're going to be like, oh, but was that really racism? Like that can be triggering in itself.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Actually, just that brought a story to my mind. I remember when I was going through some struggles with my own mental health, and I decided to go seek some help. So I was seeing a therapist, and just something as simple as this, where I was explaining to her something about my culture, basically, you know, being Jamaican, of Jamaican descent. I was explaining something about my culture, and she completely dismissed it because she'd never heard of it before. She just didn't understand that, and that's just a perfect example of
Yeah.
that help, to find somebody that can understand more of where you're coming from, because that can ultimately help you get the help that you really need. So for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
And I know it's interesting that you said in the beginning that you talked about how we decided now to add these parts into our story, because, you know, with YouthSpeak, we go into schools and we share our stories mainly about mental health and how that affected us. But for me personally, just like you said, I always shied away from this part of my mental health,
Yeah.
me, just because, not because I didn't think it was important, just because of fear, again, a fear of not wanting to ruin anybody's vibe or things like that. But I think now it's so important, especially with all the things going on. I think it's important for us to use our voice and share our story and our experience of how it affected us, because a lot of the times people are, you know, saying these ignorant things or doing these ignorant things without thinking about the result or the consequence or the person on the other end and how that event affecting that person. So yeah, I know for me, I know the first time that I ever was called the N word, it started a whole journey of really self-hate and low self-esteem for me. And I actually remember it was when I was about maybe 8 years old. I had plenty of friends in the neighborhood, and we'd always hang together. It didn't matter whether you're what color, it really didn't matter. We'd all just hang out. And I remember one day I went to go, you know, knock my friend's door and ask them if they could come outside. And they let me know that their parents said that we couldn't play because I'm an N-word. And I mean, that was the first time I had heard that word used in that context. I didn't even understand, but immediately I just felt like everything about me just wasn't good enough anymore. And it's unfortunate that I carried a lot of that throughout my teen years. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, something that we still have to deal with because of all of the things in the media and things like
Yeah.
that. But I've learned to better sort of block certain things out so that it's not affecting my mental health. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Like what you said about like kind of like feeling like a part of you was kind of like not acceptable. I definitely understand that, because like once again, like when you're a kid, you just think like, oh, everybody's the same, and nobody's like really like different from you. But then like from an young age, they definitely like learn like, oh, like there's this thing race, and people think like different about different races of people, and it takes a toll. It also takes a toll on your self-esteem, because a lot of things like media is influenced by it. All these sorts of things are definitely influenced by like race, and like also like how people perceive you. Um, I remember when I was like younger, like yeah, I remember when I was younger, like, first time, like, thought someone thought like I was stealing from like a store, and like that's another one of those things where you're like, oh, is it because of how I look, or like is it just a coincidence? Like, it's those like kind of like little things that kind of like make you feel like you're on the outside in a way. Mhm.
Absolutely.
So,
And you bring a good point about is out, because now there is, especially with the Black Lives Matter protests going on and everything that happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, there's a lot that is being thrown out in the media. And that's why I think right now it's most important to sort of protect your personal space and protect
mhm,
your health. And for me, right off the bat, when all the George Floyd stuff was happening, yes, I want to be informed because this is important stuff to me, to my community. So I do want to be informed, but I
mhm,
took to watch the video once, and I didn't watch the video in its entirety because I knew that ultimately it would affect my mental health. So I just checked
mhm,
out to understand what was happening, to be informed, but that was it. I didn't, anytime that I seen it again, I wouldn't watch it again. Anybody who shared
mhm,
it again, I wouldn't continue to watch or even get into the comments, arguing with or reading the comments and what people had to say
mhm,
about it. Ultimately, my first thing is my mental health, and that's one thing that I've learned now. Just keeping certain things at bay and even blocking certain content.
Yeah, like 100%. Like when the whole George Floyd video came out, like just like you, I didn't watch it because I knew that it would just like make me feel like in a low state, and it wasn't like I wasn't gonna put me in a good mental state. So I just like didn't. I don't think I even have watched it at this point. And a lot of it was like once again, I had to like take a break from social media when all these things were happening because I saw just a lot of people posting like a lot of like police brutality, like black bodies being beaten up, these sorts of things. And I just that wasn't good for me because I just that's not something that I wanted to see. I know that like maybe it's important for like other people to see this, to know that like this sort of thing is going on. But like, me as a black person, I know that these things are going on and I don't want to like have to like relive these sorts of things and like have this like in my psyche because like once again like I already know that these things are going on, so I had to like take a break. I even had to tell a few of my friends like when this was going on, like I don't want to talk about this right now. I had to like put up that boundary. I don't want to talk about this right now because like this is too much. I need to take some time to myself and not even like kind of like engage with this, and maybe I can engage with this later.
And it's okay to put up that boundary. I know that as another black person, everyone's going to be wanting you to say something or root for something, get out there and protest, and it's okay to just be like, you know what, this is a lot. I'm not doing okay mentally. It's affected me mentally, and it's okay to just step back. And you shouldn't let anybody make you feel bad if that's the stance that you take, because like we said, ultimately your mental health is paramount, is the most important thing.
Okay. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So during these like times, like these kind of like trying times, like with like all these Black Lives Matter protests and stuff, like how are you personally keeping yourself mentally healthy? Like regarding like these sorts of things.
So for me, like again, just not choosing the type of content that I'm consuming, first of all, because it's something as simple as that. Like you think that it's not affecting you, but you're watching it and it's sort of being embedded into your subconscious, and you go to sleep with it. You wake up agitated. So my main thing is blocking the type of content, monitoring the type of content that I'm consuming, and then also just doing more of my positive affirmation stuff, but being more intentional on the black side of it, or finding more black spaces that I can feel safe in, and buying black, just doing anything that I feel like, within little things that I feel like can help make a step forward for me, for my community, things like
Yeah,
that.
100%. Like I like what you said about like kind of like finding like black spaces you feel comfortable in, because a lot of times if you do find those spaces, and like there's a lot around, if you do find those spaces, there's a lot of things you don't have to worry about. Like there's things that you don't have to worry about, like a person like making like a racist comment to you, or like this, that, and other. You can kind of like let your mind be at ease and like kind of like put down a lot of those defenses that you might have up in, like if you're like, for example, if you're like the only black person in the room or something like that. Me personally, like I was able to find one of those spaces by like joining a mentorship group for dance, for black dancers, and it was just so refreshing for me because a lot of these things that I felt alone in, when going through like dance, like I was able to connect with these sorts of people. Because like, sometimes they'd share their stories about like, sometimes like they were met with like racist comments from, like dancers, from like even like teachers too. And like, it was interesting to connect with these people, and like talk to them about their experience because it's a shared experience. And it kind of like more validates me. And it also validated me to like learn from other black dancers, like people who look like me. Because once again, whenever I'm learning like things, dance like ballet, modern, whatever, it's always like, white teacher. And then like, during Black History Month, they'll bring in like one black teacher, and like that's their like, oh, we did it, we're cultural right now. So, but like, yeah, consistently learning from other like Black artists kind of like was very like validating for me, and being in a Black space like that was really good for me.
Nah, that's awesome.
Um,
Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to say. One space that I'm a part of, Facebook, the Black Toronto Support Group, is an amazing space, an amazing space. Get on Facebook. There's so many groups for, just like how you found your tribe of people who love dance. I'm in a Black space that loves travel. You can find your space for anything under the sun on Facebook. So definitely,
mm,
yeah, go to Facebook. But I want to throw out some questions. Oh, we have a question.
yeah,
What can other allies do to help create open conversations? Honestly, thank you, thank you. That's actually an amazing
great
question.
question.
Yeah, I'm gonna open to you. Adam, did you have any thoughts towards that? What can
Yeah, 100%. Like, pretty much like it starts with like starting the conversation with like not only like Black people, but like also like people who are not people of color, like what they think about like pretty much whatever whoever's in your own group. And also educating yourself about these sorts of situations, because when you want to have a conversation, there is kind of like a temptation to be like, oh, can you like teach me all these sorts of things about like, racism and all this sorts of stuff. But like, and sometimes people kind of make it, you know, their one Black friend to like be their source of all this knowledge, but like, that's not their job, right? And if you can, and the information is out there, and if you educate yourself about this first and you're able to start talking about it like in a safe and constructive way, that's when you can kind of have more open conversations and like maybe like not put it all on that one person, and then you can start talking to maybe your own circle too about these conversations too. And then another thing I'd say is like creating a safe space, um, knowing that like it for me personally, like knowing that like my friend who's not a person of color, if someone says like something like racist or like even like not even overtly racist, like kind of like even subtly racist, and I know that they're gonna call them out on that, that like makes me feel a lot more safe. Makes me feel like I can speak my mind, and like it makes me feel like they have my back, because when that happens and no one says anything, like we hear that, and once again, like it's like the saying, like the silence is deafening, 100%.
exactly? And for me, what someone can do to be an ally, or what an ally can do to open the conversation, is I say is to actually just be open and honest, and just just do that. Just open the conversation. I actually once had a conversation with a friend of mine who was white, and he started the conversation just starting it like that. Listen, I want to have an open and honest conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong in any way. I don't want to offend anybody in any way. I'm here to learn and I want to understand. So right off the bat, because he came from a point of understanding, even if he said something that I didn't agree with, or that was a bit, outlandish, I would have still been able to have that conversation with him, because he opened that space, and he opened that communication to let me know that he'd like to have that safe space to speak openly.
Mhm. Yeah, like, and I like what you said about like um not like being open and like being ready to learn. Because I feel like a lot of people kind of like get defensive when they start talking, when the subject of race comes up, because it's like very touchy subject. And I think that's the best way to like shut down a conversation, because a lot of times when like if it's your friend who is talking to you about race, and like say like it's your friend who's a person of color, says something like, oh, what you said at this point was like, I don't think that was like the best thing to say, like it was kind of a little bit racist. A lot of people's automatic reactions like get defensive. It's like, oh, I'm not a racist, blah blah blah. And a lot of times that kind of like makes us like not want to talk about it. It's just like, okay, whatever. Like I don't want to go through this whole like, you know, validating how not racist you are and stuff like that. Um, and a lot of times it's kind of, but like the thing is, like if your friend is coming to you and saying and actually telling you like, oh, I think like what you said wasn't like the best thing to say, that's them saying like, oh, you're my friend, and I'm in your friendship is like worth so much to me that I want to let you know that this is something that bothered me instead of kind of like pushing it down and just like not being friends with you anymore. Like, and this is like our time to like talk about it. And I think the best way to come from that is to be like, oh, I didn't realize. Can you tell me why so I can do better in the future? I think that's the best way to like kind of like have a conversation always.
For sure. And that was such a great question. Appreciate it. And I appreciate
Yeah,
everybody who even took the time to come out and sit with us for this last 30 minutes or so. It's been a great conversation. So I appreciate it. I just want to wrap it up in a few minutes, but I want to put it out there again. If you guys have any other questions, any comments, anything you'd like to say, if you'd like us to shout you out, that's okay too.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's been a really good conversation, and I was really excited to have this conversation with you, Adam, because
Mhm.
I know with Youth Speak we get to talk a lot about our mental health and how it affects us, and just recently, like we started adding this piece to our story, so it's just interesting to hear your perspective on it and how it's affected you throughout your whole journey. So thanks for even opening up and having this conversation with me.
Of course, yeah. Like once again, like when you started to add that part to your story, I kind of like made me like, oh, I should start talking about this too. And like once again, it's sometimes hard for us to like talk about this sort of thing because like we don't know if we're gonna be getting criticism from the left and from the right of people and like you don't know what people are gonna say, but I think it's more important that like people kind of like become more aware and like we kind of like put this sort of thing out there.
Definitely. And definitely on the awareness, but also just that this is our experience. This is our true experience. And this is what we do. We go and we share our true experience. So why not share all of it if we're going to share, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah. So again, I want to thank every single person who came and had this conversation with us, who came and listened, watched, just sat with us and heard what we had to say. Thank you for joining us on this Speak Real Instagram live workshop all about mental health and POC and what that means and how it's affected us. Again, I want to thank our TD sponsors for making this possible. And again, you guys reach out to www.youthspeak.ca. We have tons of resources, whether it's tip sheets for self-care, coping mechanisms. Just go check it out. We have tons of resources there. And yeah, Adam, do you have anything that you want to say in
Yeah,
closing?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody who was able to come out. Hopefully, you're able to learn something. If you have any questions, now's your last chance to put them in. But yeah, thank you so much for people for coming out.
Yes, and join us again next week. We're here every week. Every week, whether it's Monday or Tuesday, we'll be here again on Instagram Live. We talk about different subjects. Today was about mental health and POC, but we do also self-care workshops. We do online overdrive. We do a bunch of different topics. Last week we did healthy relationships. So you guys would like you to be part of the conversation. You guys DM us questions, concerns, anything you'd like us to talk about. DM us at any time you feel like it. We'll read those out and we'll make it happen. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
Bye everyone.